Hi, Jan. Welcome to Caffeine Carrots. We've been trying to do this with you for a while, so very glad you could make it. Many thanks for participating in this. I really look forward to having a good conversation with you. For the viewers, Jan is someone I really respect. She's been giving us some, very valuable feedback, helping us with the roadmap, future stuff, making us learn CS a little bit better. So Jan, again, thanks for joining in.
Oh, that's so kind of you to say all of those nice things. I've been looking forward to this too. And I got to say, I didn't realize it was called Caffeine Karrots. So I love that name. But no, I've really enjoyed our conversations in the past. I'm looking forward to this one too.
Absolutely. And, everyone knows you. You are an influencer. You're an expert in this community. But it's good for us to still, hear a little bit more about yourself from you. So we know, obviously, you're principal consultant at Success League. You have had, a long customer success career. You are an expert in this field. So tell us a little bit what got you into customer success. What has been your journey so far overall? And, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I got into tech actually just through project management before they really, you needed to have a PMP and that sort of thing, sort of back in the day of the .com era. And, all you had to do is put .com at the end of your name and you became a billionaire or something like that. Whoops, all that noise, sorry. So I got really interested in how companies could become profitable, because what I saw in the .com era is that wasn't really necessary. And I got interested in like, how do business models really work? So I actually went to business school, even though I swore it off, thought I'd never do that. And then tried a marketing role after that, which is not my thing. I appreciate marketing, but I don't like doing it. And it was after that, then, and I've always been a geek at heart. I want to know what makes things tick and how to improve them and the processes. So I ended up doing sort of a sales account management role before it was really called CS. And that's how I got addicted to CS, really, because, it's that intersection between the customer and the company. And it's such a strategic place to be. And so I was building up that practice there and continue doing it. It was an early stage. Well, it was a startup of a kind. It had been larger, it went smaller, and it was rebuilding. So when I joined, it was at 80, and then it went up to a little over 500, and then got purchased again. You know how companies do. And in that role, then I was wearing a little bit of a product hat. Before I realized really what I was doing, I just naturally dug into that, which is, I think, part of why you and I connect. And then was also really identifying with the customer and what were their needs, and that sort of thing. So I spent a big portion of my career after my MBA there. I was there for 8 years and moved up to VP. Went to another startup, which, wasn't as much of a match. They were trying to do SaaS. It was really more customized cloud services. So that was more of a professional services motion. And then after that, because entertainment was no longer really growing, I was part of entertainment tech when video on demand was just coming about. And so then everything got out there, and then it was no longer changing and everything was consolidating, never nearly as much fun. So, started doing more consulting then, but switched over to emerging tech. That's where I really got into like blockchain and AI, and probably, would have done some other things if I had more of a science or computer science background. But really working with founders on that whole motion, marketing, sales, post-sales, and how different those different motions are, right? And then when I thought I would go and work with a company again and started talking to founders, met Kristen, fell in love, and basically started working with, some other experts there, which is always fun because you just get to geek out. And so maybe I'll still go back to a startup one day. But for now, I just, geek out on CS all day.
No, very good, very good. We actually share a lot of, I think parts of the journey. I can relate to it. Account management for sure, marketing for sure.
Mhm.
I've also did some stints myself in product management, in consulting, in selling, and all of these sort of converge when you look at CS, and it is
Mhm.
good in a way. It's also challenging in other ways because now it pulls you into different directions, and the roles, and we'll discuss some of these aspects. So as you have evolved into and really seen the community grow, the industry grow, being slowly more accepted within organizations. What changes are you currently seeing? I think last 6 months to a year, there has been a fair amount of movement and shift
Yeah.
in momentum and how people view and what people are doing in operationalizing CS. So, from your standpoint, Jan, what changes are you seeing?
I think there's two primary things that I see. One is I think when CS started, it was really thought of as a high touch, only a one-on-one sort of motion. And I think that instead people are thinking of it more broadly and borrowing much more from CX and from marketing, and understanding that as long as you're clear what you're trying to achieve with a customer in that customer journey, that you can do it in lots of different ways. And in fact, it's not always beneficial for a customer to do it one-on-one. They may not have the time to get on the phone with you or on a Zoom with you, that in fact, there's things that they can and should be doing on their own, and you can deliver in other ways. So I've definitely seen the tech stack grow up a bit to support some of those things as the demand has been there for it.
Sure.
I think the other thing is just looking at the macroeconomics, right? You're looking at when you had 20 years of just pure growth and cheap money, and then you get to the last 6 or 12 months where that's tightening up and interest rates are going up, and now all of a sudden you have investors who are asking, what are your growth plans, instead of they're asking what's your break-even point. And that's really then where CS comes in very strongly, because that is where they sort of their magic happens, is making certain that we deliver on and get customers to that break-even point. But then that also means that CS leaders have to step up in a different way than perhaps they've been required in the past. And I think for any CS leaders who are afraid of being revenue leaders, this is really a time when they need to address that and learn those skills if they don't have them already. And I think that's why for some of us who've already been in sales and been, difficult conversations and negotiations and all of those kinds of things that you do when you're in the sales motion, discovery questions, all that kind of stuff, that we have an opportunity in this post-sales motion that's different than what it's been in the past. So yeah, I mean, and there's still some folks who will keep CS in support of others. And so there are ways to do that too. Now you see like CS qualified leads coming around. We're actually going to do a couple sessions on that in CS office hours, things like that. But so there's a lot of changes. I think also product-led growth has changed some things in that post-sales motion or pre-sales motion, really. Product-led growth has meant like you shouldn't touch the customer at all. So there's tools and other things that inform what we can do with CS a little more, to be a little smarter in how we do our work from that.
No, very, very relevant. So, and we are seeing this too, a big change on CS truly becoming more of a business function. And like you said, it is good, but it's also challenging, and the leaders need to step up. And then obviously the team needs to step up too to address this. So a large part of business expectations from CS as a business function has moved on to contributing to revenue now. So it's just not about, managing, retaining, adopting. It is about hard numbers. It is about, are you growing the customer or not? How practical is that? It's obviously desirable at this time, and I think a lot of management teams want it to happen. But what are practical challenges, or are you in sync with CS owning revenue completely?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with it. I did, I think it's compatible. I built friendships with people that I was also doing business with. I understood kind of where our product needed to grow because of talking to my customers, and then took a look at how we might upsell or cross sell, or what that next negotiation was going to look like. And I'm still friends with many of my clients from back then. So I think it's certainly compatible that you can still build, relationships. I mean, they do come to you for a business reason, after all. They're not just coming because they're looking for friends. They come to you for a business reason. And this model has always been land and expand. We are a subscription model that is land and expand. So that responsibility is there. I'd say that in terms of, so the relevance is there. In terms of how practical it is, I think that really depends upon how, kind of what training you have, what structure your business has. There are certainly some businesses that are more complex, or they have longer negotiations or something like that. So you may want to have someone who's specifically working on renewals and expansions in terms of the papering of it, and you have somebody else who's working on building out adoption and other motions that are related to it. But I do think, though, that there's enough difference between the pre-sales motion and the post-sales motion, and enough business pressures that are different. I think we still see a lot of sales team that are told to get the deal done no matter what. And post sales, you can't do that. You have to work with an existing customer and think about how you're going to build and grow this relationship. And then there are just other things that have to be in place foundationally for that relationship to, of expansions and renewals to take place. So I think in terms of the practicality of it, there are probably organizations that need to rethink what that customer journey looks like. They might need to rethink how they staff these roles and what training they have for them. But, I think it's important to understand the difference between pre-sales and post-sales. You can't throw a quota on it in the same way. I think you need to have projections. When you have a marketplace, you can have a quota. Your quota is to get more of the marketplace. For projections, though, is post-sales. You can't just say get more out of our current customers if you haven't primed them for it, or if they don't actually need it. You have to sell the right product to the right customer at the right time for post-sales, even more so, like on steroids.
No, agreed. And I would probably add to it is, I think what at times becomes challenging is that the expectation gets set that CS has to do this, but then you don't back it up with appropriate budget or empowerment, then it becomes a challenge. So amongst all the other pieces, I think it's fairly important to look at how are you structuring this, and what budget are you throwing behind it, and the results typically should follow post that. So absolutely. Now there's a lot of, one thing we are seeing is there's a lot of first-time revenue owners because of this. So either they're already in CS leadership roles, which didn't have that much of a revenue ask or connotation, and now their expectation has changed, or they were never in a revenue role and just moving into CS now, and it has become a hardcore numbers game. How do you overcome that challenges? What would be your guidance to such first-time revenue leaders? How do you evolve into being a good, successful revenue owner?
It's interesting. I saw a couple of posts recently, sort of on this topic, where I think it was Sam Jacobs was quoting Cassie Young about this, and something I've been working on a blog post about, and I've been thinking about a lot. Even Chad Hornfelt recently was writing about, first of all, you need to understand sort of like P&L and just the business aspect of your business. And if you don't, then you need to go through the steps of how to get there. And there's resources out there, and that's why I want to write the blog piece and that sort of thing, to kind of pull those things together. But because I'd been in sales and I've worked it through negotiations and understanding, margins and profits and those sort of things, I hadn't thought about it. And that was where Chad had really spelled out like that was something he felt really intimidated by, but he had pushed through it, and he was talking about why it was so important to get to the other side. And I think that's really true, that take a look at where your skill set, where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are. And if you have weaknesses in this area, then, this is the time to work on it. Find resources to step up on it and understand there's no place for fear. Fear should not stop you. Fear should lead you where you should go next and what you need to understand. And so there's certainly that, but companies too need to commit to training their employees in this area to help them step up. Because just all of a sudden one day saying, oh, now we turn to you, we expect you to bring in revenue, when they've spent all of this time and effort to give tools and training to the sales team and none to anything post-sales, like that is not going to get them there. And they should recognize that if they don't have the tools for, to track their pipeline of opportunities, and which are different than the sales process, right? Mm-hmm. The pre-sales process, the post-sales opportunities don't have the same type of pipeline. You need to have a tool that can help you track that. You need to understand how you're going to project, your revenues from it. All of those kinds of things are, key, very important, like we've been talking about. And then the training, helping the CSM team, or if you have a renewals team or your CS leaders, whoever is involved in your team, and it's different in almost every structure. But what do they, how do they not only learn that initially, but then how do you help them continue to learn and integrate it into their practice? Because you can't just take a class once and then boom, now you know it. That's where you get into sort of the neuroscience of learning, where you have to practice something 40 or 50 times before you really get it. And so, these kinds of things are important if a company is going to be successful, and you need that post-sales revenue to be successful. So it's important to invest in this. It's just,
right. Absolutely.
I hope they do.
Yeah. And I think we are seeing a fair amount of organizations also try and make their leaders successful by, breaking up the skill sets required. Like you said, that, you have a renewals team which is specializing in it. You have an onboarding team which is specialized in doing what they do. You obviously have more handovers internally, but that's still doable, and it allows you to own end to end rather than just own one part of it. Fair point. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you, Jan, also, we're also obviously last couple of years with pre-COVID, it had anyway started, but I think COVID just expedited it. Remote work. Now you're managing customers remotely much more now. You're managing internal teams remotely much more now, and that's not going to go away. You will try and get people back to offices, and some may happen, some may not, but it's never going to be the same world. At least that's what I believe in. I think we have to be prepared for remote work internally as well as with interactions with customers going ahead. Now, what are your thoughts around that? How does that impact CS specifically, since you said we are the bridge between the customer and the company? How does that impact us?
Well, I think a lot of tools have been around actually, and then built up even more so during the pandemic, so that we, it's very common now to meet on Zoom where it wasn't so much before, right? And so I think that there's a lot of things, practices and tools that help us with that. I think otherwise we just need to think about how do you build the team and camaraderie and accountability when you are remote, and which I think is totally possible and doable, right? I don't think that there's and frankly, we've been practicing that now for a few years. For myself, I had a hybrid team back in 2014, because when I was doing the professional services role, there were people who were out at the different studio locations working with, directly with studios. So I had, so I was in LA, but sometimes I would be traveling around. Sometimes I would try to get everybody together on Fridays in the office to kind of share war stories, help each other, connect people. And I guess you may not necessarily do that in person, but there are ways to build that remotely. And we do have global teams. So sometimes it's about getting together in person, maybe quarterly, biannually, annually.
Yeah.
But otherwise, there are ways you can build the relationships and also, but really you also accountability. Let people work in the times that make sense, as long as you know that like what they need to be held accountable for. No one really needs to be, needs somebody to look over their shoulder, and I think, I don't know, I guess for me, I've grown so used to this. I've been doing it for so long that I go through the motions without thinking about it anymore.
No, absolutely. And couldn't agree with you more. We recently launched, as you are aware, Smart Conversations a couple of months back, primarily because one, there are so many of these meetings happening over Zoom or Teams or some online channel, and a lot of context on those meetings get lost. And these are fairly valuable context of a sensitivity around the customer, how well you have helped. It's an input back into coaching. It can be an input into triggering some actions. It can give you much more insights. The good part is, compared to an in-person meeting, which you don't know anything about, you can't, go back and replay. Here, all of that is possible, and with technology, it's possible at scale. So you have a better shot at actually creating a much more customer sensitive and much more, successful team over time if you actually use these tools properly. So I think we will see some fairly interesting stuff happening on those lines going ahead.
Well, absolutely. I just want to weigh in on that a bit more because, frankly, I prefer to have the meetings on Zoom versus phone versus in person sometimes, because it actually allows you to capture it. And now that there are AI tools where you can then, go ahead and highlight certain areas and it just makes you can work smarter, where all of a sudden it will, go ahead and say, hey, remember these 3 points, or here are some follow-ups. No, frankly, that is invaluable. And that was not around back in 2014 or even in 2020 so much, right? And so the fact that all of those tools have come up, I gotta say, I don't want to go back to not using those tools.
No, 100%. Now, we'll go back to your primary expertise as well. I think you help a lot of leaders, become successful, become truly a part of a seat at the table, if you will, become a true member of representing their organization in front of a board, etc. Now, what are some very common mistakes you find, some of these leaders make that we should be wary of? I'm being asked as a CS leader to represent the function and present in a board meeting. What are some common mistakes I'm likely to make?
Yeah, well, even before you get to the board meeting, I think what happens is there's a lot of CS leaders who are waiting for permission to become part of the executive team. And I think that's their first and biggest mistake, because if you're not currently part of the executive team, but you are the highest ranking CS leader, then you need to start to represent, the customer and what your accomplishments are and what the revenue is, and just all of those kinds of things. You are at that intersection between the customer and the company, and you have to step up and show how those things are connected and how you are helping achieve the company goals, right? So the first thing is to recognize no one's going to give you permission. You have to just step up and do it. The second is that once you have done that, then what are you doing to be sort of kind to yourself so that you have sort of repeatable processes to track and manage and measure any sort of metrics that you have? And how do you know that those are repeatable? Because you need to then create sort of the leading metrics that go to the lagging metrics, right? Because the things that the board is interested in are the lagging metrics. Where are you with NRR, GRR? What are some other key things I need to know? And so and so certainly you want to be able to share those kinds of insights with the board and other key insights about where you see the marketplace and your customers going or need and what their needs are, right? Because you are at that intersection, you can provide those insights when you're at the board meetings. But I think before that, if you were going to try and achieve any of the things you're trying to accomplish for any sort of business goals you may have, OKRs, or for the metrics that we all know, like NRR, GRR, like how are you going to get there? Knowing what sort of leading metrics are going to move the needle towards that. How are you going to help your team do the things that they need to be able to deliver on those metrics, and how they prioritize their time so that they're working on those high impact activities, right? Like those are the kinds of things that the CS leader needs to understand so that they can sort of shepherd their team towards those goals so that then they can, come to the board with some good news. But you also need to understand your projections, because if you're not going to give good news, you want to project that and signal that early. You want to say, hey, there's an issue here. I think these 3 customers are at risk, and do it in a time where you can perhaps make some motions towards resolving that, but which is different than say chasing the churn. If they've already come to you and said they were going to churn, so I think that again, that's why there's a lot of AI tools that are useful now that can help to analyze some of these data signals that are coming in. I think that's really critical. We need to be smarter as CS leaders in how we use these tools, because that's how we're smarter as companies. It's all about the customer, or else we don't get to exist.
Right.
There's no better place to be than to be a CS leader. Like it's the most exciting place to be in the company, frankly.
Absolutely.
But I'm biased.
We all are, but I think it's a fair bias. I think it's not grounded in fantasy. It's actually grounded in reality. So so I think it's fair to be biased. It's all good. So Jen, thanks a lot. I think this very valuable insights. I'm sure it is definitely helpful to me. It's helpful to my team. I'm sure it'll be very helpful to people who go through this podcast and listen to it. Feel free to reach out to Jan should you have any follow-up questions. Reach out to me should you have any follow-up questions around any of these elements which we discussed today. Jan, anything else you would want to summarize at the end? Yeah,
I would just say, look, for any of those leaders out there who feel uncomfortable, taking that step towards the, executive team, or feel uncomfortable taking that step towards being a revenue leader, please do reach out to me. It's okay to first acknowledge where you're at. That doesn't mean you can't get to that destination. And don't beat yourself up, empower yourself, and that's what it's all about.
Wonderful. On that note, Jan, thanks again. Very, very enjoyable and good learning experience talking to you as usual. So we'll look forward to the next time. Have a good day. Okay.
Thanks a lot.